You look at this new supposed but unverified massive biggest gold discovery ever found ever in China. Well, what better way for them in a year or two when this were to happen to say, yes, we've told you this is all we have, but this gold find, we were able to extract so much gold that, and you mentioned Alasdair Macleod. 2 years ago, Alasdair said the Chinese had 38,000 metric tons in his estimation, 20 by the state and 18 by the people. What better way to say, actually, we have 45,000 metric tons, not the 26 that we told you, because this gold find, well, God, it was huge. Well, how would we know? How would anyone know? My point to you is simply this. Do not trust what they're saying as it relates to gold, because we're playing the same game. No one knows how much gold we have, if we even have it any longer. And if indeed we are moving to a system that is tied to the stability of gold.
Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin, has highlighted the alarming lack of transparency surrounding U.S. gold reserves, particularly those stored at Fort Knox and the New York Federal Reserve, which have not been audited since 1953. This prolonged opacity raises significant questions about the status and security of these assets, which the Federal Reserve holds on behalf of the Treasury, making them the property of the American people. Despite repeated calls for audits to ensure accountability and rebuild public trust, such efforts have been consistently dismissed. Schectman argues that proper transparency is essential to restoring confidence in U.S. monetary policy, especially in an era where global economic stability is increasingly questioned. Globally, central banks have significantly increased their gold purchases, marking a substantial shift in financial strategy. Over the past 2 years, more than 2,000 metric tons of gold have been added to reserves, a pace not seen in 2 decades. In 2022, central banks set a new record by acquiring 1,082 metric tons, followed by 1,037 metric tons in 2023, the second highest annual total ever recorded. Nations like China, Russia, Poland, and India have led this accumulation, with Poland adding 42 metric tons this year, bringing its total reserves to 420 metric tons. This gold-buying surge highlights nations' deliberate effort to protect themselves against economic uncertainties. According to Andy Schectman, China's gold strategy is particularly striking. While China officially reports its gold reserves at approximately 2,300 to 2,400 metric tons, many analysts, including Alasdair Macleod, estimate that the actual holdings could be much higher, potentially exceeding 38,000 metric tons. Of this, the state is believed to control 20,000 metric tons, while the remaining 18,000 metric tons are privately owned. Much of this accumulation remains unreported to international organizations like the IMF, as China strategically imports unrefined gold through proxy banks and sovereign wealth funds. Such moves, alongside massive gold acquisitions by other nations, reflect a growing shift toward gold-backed financial systems and away from traditional fiat currencies. Before we dive deep into this video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.
But what you are seeing is that the rest of the world is looking at gold as an option to hold rather, in my mind, than the U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury, which has been weaponized, can be taken and in fact, using those proceeds potentially to give to a country you're in the midst of a war against, the way that we have done against Russia. We defaulted on $5 billion worth of their U.S. Treasuries that we were holding, and we gave the proceeds to the Ukraine. $50 billion worth of European Treasuries, the EU took all of the interest and gave that in the form of a loan to the Ukraine, amounts to several $1 billion. The West, I believe, has crossed a line that's very difficult to come back from. Again, the erosion of trust. And so not only that, you look at last year, it was the worst year ever for the 10-year Treasury, or the second worst year ever for the 10-year Treasury. In fact, where gold had less volatility for the first time in 45 years than the U.S. Treasury did. And this is why Judy Shelton's idea, the whole idea of her book, is to come back to a 50-year Treasury that is redeemable in gold at the end of a 50-year period, to inspire confidence. But to her point, and to my question to her, is that in order for this to work, don't we have to show how much gold we truly have? And her answer was yes. And when we look at the rest of the world is not being honest. China, for example, is not being honest about how much gold they have. They've been producing between 300 and 500 metric tons a year as the largest producer in the world, using our trade imbalance to mine gold that it was even uneconomical. They see the big picture. They look out into the future. They don't care what it costs to pull it out of the ground at. Those numbers alone would be far more than we have for years, Kai. I've been doing this for 35 years this February. And forever, people would say to me back in the 90s, yeah, and I'm talking mentors of mine, Jim Sinclair, Richard Russell, people that I would have the good fortune of talking to, and they would say, look, the 1,200 metric tons that never seemed to change way back then, that the Chinese would never update. Well, that's not right. They have way more than they're telling us. It's a strategic decision. And now they're at 2,300 metric tons. So in all of the, or 24, whatever it is, all those years, they've only added 800 metric tons. That's silly. It's not even close. And they're the largest producer in the world. They're the largest importer in the world. They're the second largest producer of silver in the world. They are a net importer, used to be a net exporter. They're buying doré. They're buying concentrate. The countries that they are striking deals with on the Belt Road are all massively resource rich and underdeveloped. But when these countries buy, for example, through a sovereign wealth fund, that's not reported to the IMF. The doré and the concentrate is not 995 pure or 999 pure. That's not reported to the IMF. When the People's Liberation Army buys, and they probably have as much or more than the PBOC, that's not reported to the IMF. And so, why would they be forthright and open about the amount of gold that they have when we aren't? And not only that, when you look at the fact that the BIS reclassified gold as the world's only other tier one reserve asset, and you see all of the central banks accumulated, including those in Europe, and when they saw what happened to the Bundesbank, give us back our gold, well, it only takes 5, 6, 7 years to get it back. I think the lack of trust in our traditional instruments like Treasury instruments, and the possibility of going back to a system, as Zoltan Pozar says, Bretton Woods III, a system that will be about transparency, a la blockchain and commodities, a la gold. Just like Delma Rousseff told us, the unit would be gold backed 40% traded on Enbridge and would be deliverable upon demand. Well, it just makes sense that the central banks understand this. Look, you could talk about the rise of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and that could be a strategic asset. Sure, but it ain't going to back a currency system. It has too much volatility. Gold, on the other hand, would be the perfect backing. Even Kristalina Georgieva, the head of the IMF, said a central bank digital currency not pegged to something is fiat. Well, what else are they going to peg it to but what the BIS said is the only other tier one asset? And you go back to the beginning of 23, the report that came out of the IMF saying gold as an international reserve currency, comma, a barbarous relic, no more, question mark. You put all of the things together, even look at the European central banks in your neck of the woods. All of them have been accumulating gold, and look at the way that the gold relation to their GDP is level across the entire European Union. It's if they're all preparing for some form of a gold revaluation, some form of a new system tied to gold. So these countries, it would be in their best interest to not say, this is how much we have. And I find it, there's a fine line between conspiracy and reality, Kai. And you look at this new supposed but unverified massive biggest gold discovery ever found ever in China. Well, what better way for them in a year or two when this were to happen to say, yes, we've told you this is all we have, but this gold find, we were able to extract so much gold that, and you mentioned Alasdair Macleod. 2 years ago, Alasdair said the Chinese had 38,000 metric tons in his estimation, 20 by the state and 18 by the people. What better way to say, actually, we have 45,000 metric tons, not the 26 that we told you, because this gold find, well, it was huge. Well, how would we know? How would anyone know? My point to you is simply this. Do not trust what they're saying as it relates to gold, because we're playing the same game. No one knows how much gold we have, if we even have it any longer. And if indeed we are moving to a system that is tied to the stability of gold, as Judy Shelton says, is the only way to reestablish trust. Now, hers is not quite the gold standard as it once was, the classic gold standard, but tying a 50-year treasury to gold, which would be the first pathway to reestablishing trust with the United States monetary policy. Same thing is true with global monetary policy. And if that's where they think it's all going, it doesn't do them any good, not only to tell everyone how much gold they have, but to keep their mouth shut in terms of how much through proxy banks and sovereign wealth funds that they are draining from the COMEX and from the LBMA, using the stupidity of the Western banks that continue to suppress the price. And look at the drawdown in supply. We're just playing right into the hands of these countries. So it doesn't do any good to say how much they're accumulating or how much they have if the ultimate goal is to reintroduce this asset into the backing of a new monetary system. And I think ultimately that is where it will go to some degree. And maybe what the BIS did put a little bit of a damper. But remember, this is Chinese technology. They're going to continue to move forward with this, and they're going to settle in local currencies, and they are going to offset any difference on a net basis with gold until they get a new system. I think the whole thing is moving in that direction. And anyone that would hold treasuries that aren't gold backed of any duration right now in a country that has signaled inflation over austerity forever is foolish, especially when it can be weaponized. And that is what led to this whole group of the BRICS and the whole idea of using a gold-backed currency instead of a dollar, which is losing value precipitously every day and can be weaponized against you if we don't agree with what you're doing.
The silver market is facing the potential of a historic short squeeze driven by the manipulation of a small group of powerful banks, including Bank of America and JP Morgan, which hold significant short positions. This manipulation has kept silver prices artificially suppressed, creating a dangerous situation where paper claims to silver vastly exceed the available physical supply by a ratio of 400 to 450 to 1. With COMEX registered inventories reaching historically low levels, the risk of a market disruption is high. While these banks have benefited in the short term, this strategy could undermine the stability of the silver market in the long run. Andy Schectman highlights how Eastern nations, particularly China, have accumulated silver through unconventional methods, such as buying concentrates from miners and utilizing sovereign wealth funds. This growing demand from China and other countries, as well as Western banks' continued suppression of silver prices, could create a tipping point. Andy suggests that a major commercial bank failing to deliver on its short positions could dramatically increase silver prices. This failure could initiate a chain reaction, leading to a shift in market control from the west to the east, fundamentally altering the global silver market.
Here is the supply-demand numbers from the Silver Institute. Industrial, electronics, electrical, brazing alloy, other industrial. There is no military information in there. And when you look at this is the right now COMEX. The red line represents the big four commercial banks who hold the largest position, and we can guess who they are. Bank of America, maybe Citibank, JP Morgan, whoever they are. And the green line represents the 8 commercial banks, the big four plus 4 more. It's 8 Western banks holding the largest concentrated short position in any commodity traded. And this is what is happening as a result. This is the LBMA numbers. You can see this drawdown. They are using the suppression to draw down the metal held by the West. And I would argue it's because of the military industrial complex. I've given speeches in Vancouver where I'll see you in January, where I've said there's 500 ounces of silver in the tip of a tomahawk. 2 years ago, a man came up to me and said, I work for the DOD. I helped design the tomahawk. I know there's silver in it. I'll let you know. He came back this last year, January, 11 months ago, and he said, I'll be damned, you're right. There is between 13 and 14 kilograms in the cone of every one of these sophisticated missiles. And he showed me all sorts of pictures. But when you realize that in 1942, they needed 200 million ounces a year of silver for war effort, and now the high-tech weaponry is so much more sophisticated, and you need things like silver to make this high-tech weaponry. And we're fighting wars all over the world, often funding or providing weapons to both sides. Why would 8 Western banks be that stupid to hold the price down, Kai, when Russia says it's now part of our strategic stockpile, when India is purchasing 900 million ounces over the last 4 to 5 years, when China, the second largest producer of silver in the world, and they tell David Morgan when he went over there that they're the largest producer. But why are they going to Sean Kuhn from Dolly Varden? He said, yes, this is happening. They're going to South America. 78% of all the silver they're using right now for industrial applications comes from concentrate. They're going right to the miners and saying, give us your sludge, your concentrate, and your doré. We'll pay way more than the West will, and we'll refine it back in China. If they're the second, maybe the first largest producer in the world, why the hell are they doing that? Why are they flying all the way around the world to buy uneconomical silver in the form of concentrate or doré and paying to ship it back home to China, which disintermediates the market and the price? Why would they do that if silver wasn't strategic? It's not that it's an industrial metal that they massively need. That's why they're doing this. It's because they realize silver is far more strategic than we are led on to believe. And ask it another way. Why would 8 banks risk an existential threat to themselves by doing this? And we're playing right into the hands. You see that drawdown. We're playing right into the hands of these countries who know what we are doing. Let me answer it a slightly different way and say the BRICS grain exchange is in development right now. And the gentleman who's running it said, we produce more wheat and consume more than the West does, yet we can't control its price by any metric. It's controlled on COMEX. But when the BRICS grain exchange is up and running, that will change. Now, you could just substitute that thinking with the BRICS precious metals exchange, which is in development. They know what we are doing, that we are controlling and suppressing on paper the price of gold and silver and other commodities, and they are using it against us. Like jiu-jitsu, use your opponent's leverage against us. So it is a massive deal. That's why I've always been fond of the term logarithmic decay, little by little by little, then bang all at once. Well, that's exactly what you're seeing with the drawdown in the silver inventories and the fight by the Western institutions to suppress its price. But you can only manipulate or suppress price, or manipulate price would be a better way to say it, over an extended period of time, Kai, by pushing it in the direction it's going. And all of the years I've been doing this, no one stood for delivery. It's that backdoor option where, you can stand for delivery. No one ever did. But these countries are sophisticated, motivated, coordinated, and wealthy as hell, and they know what we're doing, and they're using it against us methodically. People would think because we live in an environment where instant gratification is too slow, we need it to be right now. Well, they're like, no. We can't just throw $5 trillion at the market and buy everything because it will be over just like that. But instead, we'll play the game with them, and we'll just continue to slowly stand for delivery, go around the country and use proxy banks around the world, use proxy banks or use the PLA to do it, or buy through sovereign wealth funds, or quietly stand for delivery. Not too much to freak out the exchanges, but just enough so we can bleed them dry, death by 1,000 paper cuts, and you wake up one morning and there is no one stupid enough to offer at these make-believe prices in the West. And just like that, everything switches to Shanghai, to Dubai, to Moscow, to the BRICS exchange, and the price setting will move from the West to the East. It's a long game. And look, I will fully acknowledge silver is enough to drive someone insane because it's very counterintuitive. But this is a battle going on, not only between the industrials and the hedge funds or the manufacturers and the investors, but also between the East and the West. And I think it is the Achilles heel to the entire system. Easier said than done to follow that belief, but watch what's happening. Follow the crumbs, and you'll see this is what they're doing. And they're doing it in a very judicial and methodical manner so as to extract maximum amount over a period of time without causing an uproar or a congressional hearing or President Trump to say, no, we need to stop allowing delivery of our critical metals. That hasn't happened yet. And that's why it's happening. It's been happening over 4 years, but in a way that really is slow enough to make even the commentators lose sight of it.
Silver demand is experiencing a sharp rise due to its essential role in industries such as green technology, electronics, and medicine. However, global silver mine production has declined since 2016, with new deposit discoveries falling by 50% in the last decade, creating a widening supply-demand imbalance. This situation is further exacerbated by growing global uncertainty, which has heightened interest in precious metals as a safe haven. As industrial users may begin stockpiling physical silver, and financial institutions face the prospect of covering massive short positions, the market is approaching a critical tipping point. This could trigger a dramatic and sustained price movement, potentially reshaping the precious metals market and its role in global finance for years to come. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.